Good afternoon and welcome to the Chamber's monthly webinar series for Women Connect. Today we're really excited to bring to you the power of pivoting, and we've got a great hour planned for you. And before we get started on the program, I just want to give everybody an update. We've had a lot of questions about San Diego Women's Week, and I'm really proud to announce that Women's Week is going to go virtual. And it is scheduled for Friday, August 28th for the Leadership Conference. And the virtual Women in Wine will be happening on August 26th. We've got a great lineup of speakers. We've had all of our speakers confirmed to come back with the exception of Catherine Schwarzenegger because she's due to have a baby. However, she did do a webinar with us, which most of you attended a couple months ago. So we've added 3 new speakers, powerhouse speakers, including an executive, Peggy Johnson from Microsoft, that will be talking about vulnerable leadership vulnerability, and they've got some great announcements to make. So if you want more information, sdwomensweek.com. We're really excited to be hosting this. We're going to be using a platform that will make it interactive for our attendees, and you will be able to communicate with our speakers as well. So typically you haven't been able to communicate with the speakers, but you'll have a chance to ask questions and so much more. Emails are going to be going out to everybody that has tickets and what you're going to be getting with that. So any questions, feel free to give me a call or email me anytime. I'm always available. And then without further ado, I want to talk about what's going to be on the schedule for today. So today we're going to be talking about the power of pivoting. And we have an amazing lineup. And I'm really excited to have all of them. And they're going to be introduced to you by a woman who I have a tremendous amount of respect for, Lee Wills from Sony. Many of you know Lee. She's very well respected in the marketplace. And Lee is one that has pivoted quite a bit herself, and I always enjoy watching her because her pivots always turn into huge success. Lee is a values-centered senior human resource leader with expertise in both diversity and inclusion, employee relations, and talent acquisition. And she's had executive roles at Fortune 500 tech companies like Intel, Qualcomm, Sony. Lee certainly knows a lot about pivoting again and is respected for creating mission-focused strategies and optimizing resources. She's got a strong belief in the power of technology to positively change lives. And she's passionate about connecting business and community. So please join me in welcoming Lee Wills, one of my favorite all-time leaders out in the region. So thank you, Lee, for joining us today.
Deborah, thank you. It's great to be here with everyone. I'm excited to be part of Women's Week Virtual, and we've got an exciting panel for you today. I did experience a little bit of technical difficulty, so I'm going to be utilizing 2 computer screens. So as I go through introductions, I'm going to take a look at my second computer screen. Today, I have the distinct pleasure to introduce you to 4 incredible women that have pivoted many times in their lives. They will share with us the lessons they've learned and how we may be able to use those same lessons in our own lives. Our first panelist today is Erica Alfaro. Erica was born in Fresno, California, grew up in Tijuana, Mexico. Her parents never had the opportunity to go to school. Didn't know how to read or write, but knew the importance of a good education. At age 13, Erica's family moved to Oceanside, and she lived in a small apartment with another family in a community rife with gang activity and poverty. Teenage pregnancy was also common, and Erica found herself pregnant. She dropped out of high school, moved to Fresno with her son's father, and lived with domestic abuse for many years, including having to sleep outside with her young baby. In the midst of despair, she remembered when she was 13, working in the field with her mother. And her mother told her that she was tired. And her mother's response was that this is our life. Only people with good education are the ones with good lives. That's when Erica realized that she needed to return to school. In 2019, Erica received a master's in education from San Diego State University. To honor her parents' sacrifices in coming to this country, to give her a better life. She had her graduation pictures taken on that very same tomato field. These pictures went viral and her story was shared around the world. A movie is currently being made about her story. Welcome, Erica. Our second panelist is Captain Emily Caffeine. Captain Kathy is a 1999 graduate of the United States Naval Academy, and she has served in a variety of sea and shore commands. Kathy's sea assignments include duty on cruisers, carriers, destroyers, patrol boats, and combat ships. She is respected by many for being the first female commanding officer aboard the USS Independence. At the encouragement of her mother, Emily went into the military because she told her that everyone in the military received the same pay, regardless of gender. Emily has sailed around the world, from San Diego to India, from Norfolk to the North Arabian Sea, down and around South America. She is also a mom, wife, sister, and daughter. Welcome, Captain. Our next panelist is Alicia Guin. Alicia is the wife of baseball great and Hall of Famer Tony Gwynn. She's no stranger to community building or philanthropy and very much focused on empowerment. She's carrying on Tony's legacy by continuing the work that was important to both of them, empowering young people to do their best and seek opportunities to grow and become better people. Praised as one of San Diego's leading ladies, Dr. Alicia Gwynn, longstanding business owner and philanthropist, and now recording artist with the recent release of her new CD, I Am Alicia Gwynn, is blazing a trail of renewed hope, faith, and courage through her music, life, and story. In addition to touring with her music, Alicia has launched her own wine. She maintains a robust portfolio as the president and CEO of Gwynn Industries, Gwynn Foods, Gwynn Sports, and president of the Tony Gwynn and Alicia Gwynn Foundation. Welcome, Alicia. Our fourth panelist, Sarah Husein. Sarah was born in North Carolina. No, sorry. Sarah was born in North Africa, Algeria, and grew up in San Diego. Her summers were spent on the Mediterranean, and she traveled both back and forth, gave Sarah a global perspective. With her command of English, Arabic, and French, she gravitated towards international development work. Her first job out of undergrad was working in refugee camps in Lebanon, conducting socioeconomic living assessments. After 1 year of research and advocacy, Sarah moved to Washington, D.C., where she spent 7 years in government consulting, diplomacy, and international development. Sarah's marriage took her to Saudi Arabia in 2013, where she assumed the role of director of an organization focusing on building the skill sets of expatriate women. Amidst her adjustment to living in one of the most conservative countries in the world, she became ill and was hospitalized. She returned to San Diego to recuperate. While away, her husband divorced her, and Sarah was left penniless and homeless. At age 30, Sarah had lost all sense of direction, identity, and purpose. But she was open to the opportunity to rebuild, rebrand, and decide what she really wanted to do. The world is your oyster, and the sky is your limit. These are the words her mother whispered to her in her ear daily. Today, she is a strong advocate for refugees in San Diego and volunteers with several organizations. Welcome, Sarah. Wow, what a phenomenal panel. So excited to talk with you this afternoon. Let's start with a few questions. The format will be informal, and we encourage everyone on the line to ask questions that you might have using the chat feature. So I'll start with a question for the panelists. We all have journeys, and we heard a little bit about yours that have taken us to places that we never imagined. Tell us about some of the obstacles or challenges you've had to face either growing up or within your journey that have gotten you where you are today? Captain Emily, Kathy, would you like to go first?
Sure, happy to. You know, I actually asked my husband this question. I was like, "Hey, what really have I done or worked through?" And he reminded me that I came up in the Navy, started in the Naval Academy in the mid '90s, and had been a sailor on ships and in the early group of women who were allowed on combatant ships. And so when I think about, you know, working through those different concerns or experiences, I will say first of all that youth and not necessarily being aware that folks have never really worked with women on board a combat ship before, and not really paying attention to that was certainly helpful. But the experiences of just pushing through and knowing where you want to go and what your end state is, and in the Navy we call some of that extraneous chaff, so chatter, and just keeping that locked up and where it needs to be, and then pushing through and getting to where you want to go, and then working with others who, for the most part, realize that once you're there to support and do your job, you know, the rest of the gender issues sort of fall away.
Thank you. That was definitely enlightening, and I can imagine new challenges for you completely along the way. Alicia? Oh, I think you're muted.
Oh, sorry.
Perfect.
So I want to say that my journey sort of began when I was young, because 8 kids of us. There was 8 of us. And, you know, I always had to, even though I wasn't the oldest, but I was always the one that had to do everything and help my sisters and brothers. And I remember, you know, we didn't have much, but my mom taught us how to sew. We made all of our clothes. So I go off to college, you know, and I'm running track. I have run the track team, and I had to still support myself. So I worked 8 hours from, I remember, midnight to 8. And I drove the forklifts. I unloaded the 40-foot semi-rigs and drove them. And so then I fast forward into a dream life, marrying Hall of Fame Tony Gwynn. We grew up together at childhood friends, you know, from grade school, and we go to college, all the way up to college. And then we marry. And so to me, it's my perfect world, you know, the dream of my life, you know, my soulmate. And, you know, that's how it all began for me, you know, just really learning to, you know, grow in this. And then we were all about family, and family is so important. And so, again, the dream life, and then everything changes after that. But most of it was, you know, I've always been sort of the matriarch, you know, and going to college, and, you know, really learning how to deal with certain different things. And, you know, to have your soulmate taken away, then your life begins in a different way.
Alicia, thank you for sharing that. I know that was very personal, and you know, we feel your loss. Tony Gwynn was a huge figure in San Diego, huge figure. Thank you. Erica.
Hi. Yes, I became a mother at the age of 15. I was a teenage mother. My parents are farm workers that never had the opportunity to go to school. They don't know how to read or write. Also, I went through domestic abuse, and with my baby's father, I ended the relationship when I was 18 years old. I had to be a single mother at the age of 18. I had to work full time while going to school full time to support my son. Then when I started college, my son was diagnosed with cerebral palsy. I went through depression. Plus, I was also going through post-traumatic stress because of the domestic abuse. And I had everything against me, but at the end of the day, I was the first in my family to go to college. I obtained my bachelor's degree in psychology. I became the commencement speaker for my graduation ceremony. And then I obtained my master's degree. And to honor the sacrifices of my parents, I took the pictures in the fields, and the pictures became an international news.
You know, hearing your story, Erica, is really amazing and heartening. And I can't imagine what strength it took for you to leave that domestic abuse situation. Thank goodness you had that ability. And we're going to talk about what it took for each of you to move on that pivot point. Before we do, I'd love to hear from Sarah.
Awesome, thank you. Thank you everyone for being here. My obstacle started when I was young. I was always different. I grew up in the Midwest. As Lee introduced, I was born in North Africa, but we came here when I was 1. So I was raised in Houston, and then we moved to a city outside of Chicago. And no one looked like me. No one had curly hair. Everyone had blonde, perfect hair. And I never felt like I belonged. My parents spoke a different language. I had different food in my lunchbox. And I always grew up like trying to be friends with everybody. I didn't really have one set of friends. I became very eclectic my whole life. In high school, I would float around at lunch and I would hang out with everybody. I think when you grow up thinking that you're different, you realize how alike you are with everybody else. And that kind of led me down my path, just wanting to travel the world, trying to help people who are underserved and trying to start over or are displaced. And so it was hard in the sense where I was constantly getting drilled with what my identity was, but I didn't fully understand it. My parents, looking back, did an excellent job with reminding me, be proud that you're Muslim, be proud that you're Arab, be proud of your North African heritage, your lineage of strong women that you descend from. But I really resented it for a very long time because it blocked me from being cool in high school and doing the things that everybody else did. I grew up with very strict parents. I'm first daughter of a first generation immigrants. And so I waded high waters. And I look back now and I thank them for what they taught me to be proud of who I am, because now I get to work and empathize with a lot of different people around the world.
One thing I'm hearing from each of you is just the strong foundation you had from your families and how much support, and that's super, super important. I'd love to hear from each of you. What was your turning point? How did you get to that point where you knew you had to make a change and actually embrace it? Because that sort of a huge change can be very scary and it's difficult to do. So how did you go about doing that? Captain Kathy?
Okay, so first, let me start by noting that I don't think you have just one big pivot point. I think you ultimately experience a series of pivots and moments that get you to that next one in your path. For me, my first really big pivot was I failed. I failed out of nuclear power school. And there were reasons, which I will spare all y'all because perfectionist that I am, I have most certainly overthought them. But in leaving school ahead of my peers, I ended up on an engineering tour in a very old, very big steam plant, this steam engineering plant on an aircraft carrier. I showed up in an apartment, which is how focused areas are grouped on a Navy ship, that was mostly men, and I was the only and probably the first female senior enlisted or senior or even officer that most of the men had ever seen, let alone worked with. Luckily, I was 24, and that fact had eluded me. I worked hard, I got the big qualification that I needed, and I excelled in that tour. And that tour ultimately set up a foundation for the rest of my career, something that I never, ever expected. I continued on and served as a chief engineer on a completely different ship class with a completely different engineering plant, and even ended up as a lieutenant commanding a ship at sea. Heck, I even met my husband. And so my advice is, to every once in a while, look back, trace out those moments and those experiences and see where they have led you and how you can continue to grow and build upon either the success or the failure from that moment.
Awesome, thank you, thank you. I find it's really interesting that you said it's not just one thing or one point, but it's many things that add up to get you there. I'm going to jump over to you, Erica, and ask you the same question.
Like Emily said, I can think of many examples, but one of the strongest ones is I come from a culture that it's normal for women to live under domestic abuse. When I ask for help with my family members, when I show them the bruises, they said, "You will never make it as a single mother. You need to stay with your baby's father." And I I remember that that night, my baby's father forced me and my baby to sleep outside the house, and I was outside the house feeling hopeless, wondering why this was happening to me. And that is the moment that I realized that if I wanted to change my life, I had to take action, that I couldn't sit there and wait for things to get better. And one of the most important factors is that moment when I remember a memory of my mother when she took me to work with her in the fields and told me, this is our life because we never had the opportunity to go to school. If you want a better life, you need to get a good education. And that is that was one of the most important memories that I have of how everything turned into a different direction. Also, I'll say that the second reason, when I was about to end my career goals, when I was at Cal State San Marcos, when my son was diagnosed with cerebral palsy, I was academically disqualified from Cal State San Marcos. I was told that I could no longer be a student there. And I even gave up on my dreams of having a career. But one morning when when I was getting my son ready for school, he asked me, "Mommy, do you have a career already? Remember that every day you used to say that one day you were going to have a career, that we were going to live in a house and have a dog?" And that was the first time that I heard my son speak in a clear sentence. That was that moment when I told myself that I will no longer give up and that I was going to accomplish my dreams. And those are only two examples because I have a lot of examples, but those are the two main ones.
Those are two huge ones, and I think everybody listening felt that right here. Yeah, that's absolutely amazing, and it's amazing too the effect of our words when we hear them shared back to us from our children, what that does to us as well. Sarah?
Yeah, so as Lee explained, my marriage did take me to Saudi, and I was back healing from a surgery. And if you had asked me at 7:50 a.m., if you had told me, "Hey, your husband's going to do this to you," I would have laughed. I said, "No, he's not." This is the bubble that I was living in, and I've been told I live off this concept of hope and just this naivety that I carry with me. And yes, sure enough, I go downstairs for breakfast with my parents, and they're looking at me with a solemn expression. They told me that my husband had just divorced me, which, you know, I come from a religion where it's easy for a man to do that. I lost all ability to talk, swallow, sleep, eat for a while. I had an amazing support system that helped me immediately get therapy, get help. But I did not know what my purpose was at that point. Everyone kept saying, Sarah 2.0 is coming, you get to rebrand, you get to start your life all over again. But that's not what I wanted. And oftentimes in life, you think you know what you want. You think that, well, no, this is the path I'm on. This is what I want to do. Looking back, it was the best thing that happened to me. I was able to really look within myself and explore my self-worth. And my second turning point was 2 years later, because I really battled with failure with my divorce. I felt like I failed at my marriage. This man walked out. How did I go wrong after 9 years? And I never really got the answers, and I had to give them to myself. And the journey of self-worth took a couple of years. It took time. And 2 years later, I found myself in a job that wasn't the right fit. And I just woke up one day and walked out because I had worked so hard on building myself again and being proud of the person I saw in the mirror that now, you know, there's nothing that'll stop my self-worth ever from going back to the way it was.
That's huge. Thank you for sharing, Sarah, and sharing about the challenges that you had to overcome to get to this point. I mean, that's very, very personal, and you had to dig deep, I know, to get there. Alicia, let's move on to you. And, you know, losing a life partner, and when I read your story and your biography, you haven't just continued, but you've even forged new paths. So we'd love to hear from you.
Yes. So I look at it that I garnered the 3 P's: from pain to pivot to purpose. And when I remember when Tony passed, but before he passed, he says, Alicia, you have to finish the work. He said, I just got to know that you're going to be okay because you have to finish the work. And, you know, I didn't want to hear that. I didn't want to hear that. And I believed up until that last day, his last breath, that he was going to get better. And, you know, you have to understand when you have a soulmate and you grew up with this person and you did everything together, it was never just one person. We were a team. And so when he was gone, I felt like my whole world had left. I felt like I didn't even want to be here. I didn't want to be here at all. I stayed in bed. I cried all the time, you know, but I remember his words and I have to say the power of family, the institution of family is so important to me. And I remember I stayed in the bed for days. I'd get up and I'd literally take a shower and go right back and get in the bed. And I remember one day my daughter stepped in and she said, listen, you have to get up. This is not what Dad would want. I remember she just threw the covers off with me. She said, today you're going to go get a shower and then you're going to put on some gym clothes and we're going to CrossFit. And I was like, no, I don't want to go. She said, no, you're going. What did Dad say? You have to finish the work. She said, we're here. We need you. And I remember getting up and going to CrossFit, and I never looked back. And she reminded me, she said, what did Dad tell you to do? I always wanted to sing. 2 things I always wanted to do, sing and dance. And so I decided, she said, Dad said, you need to do it. And I did. I went, I got producers, I began to sing, I began to do the things that I really wanted to do. I continued on with his developing, you know, he had already developed the beer with L. Smith. I continued on with it, made sure I worked with it, continued charity work, but it was really my family that really was my support system, the best support system ever. And to this day, they're still the support system. And now I'm singing, I'm traveling, you know, doing shows, and it's, you know, I'm keeping up with the 394 beer, and, you know, but, you know, it was just, I have to say, it was my family that really helped me, my son, my daughter, and my grandchildren. And I look back at what Tony helped create, and it was that family that was really had me to pivot to my purpose.
That is so amazing. I mean, you not only continued Tony's legacy, but are building one of your own and for your family. So thank you for that. Thank you. Sarah, how did you know when it was time to change direction?
Well, I do believe the body speaks to you. So I was working at Amazon after my divorce. I moved to Seattle. That was part of, you know, starting over, and moved to a new city, made new friends, and found my hobbies. But my job didn't necessarily speak to my purpose. I felt like I had regressed in my life professionally. And my body, I just started gaining weight. I started developing all these medical problems, and I kept ignoring it. And then I would have these crying fits. I just didn't understand what was wrong. And I went to a holistic doctor, and they told me, he told me, he's just like, you're under so much stress. Like, you need to make serious changes in your life. And there was nothing I wanted to change about my life. But the deeper I dug, I realized it was my job. And it was hard because, you know, that's my lifeline. That was my salary. That was why I moved to the city. And it's hard to just start admitting that I had made another wrong decision right after I had just made this move. But essentially, the biggest lesson I learned out of that is not to ignore the signs physically that come to you. And I definitely admit that, you know, I had a lot of depression after my divorce. And looking back, I probably didn't give my all to. Now I see myself at Qualcomm and what I'm doing, the amount of passion I bring to it. And so I took a self-inventory where I was like, I'm not fully myself. I'm not showing up authentically right now. I miss the person I was years ago. Where is she? And I had to tap into myself and do some deep self-work. I got an amazing therapist, a lot of really great books. I recommend Eckhart Tolle. And just one day woke up and just didn't go back. And you know, when you set the right intention and you manifest who you want to be, things fall into place. I had interviews lined up within a few weeks, and I got this job at Qualcomm within a month and a half, which I had been searching casually for months before that. But I do believe when like Alicia just said about making that conscious decision to make a change, everything falls into place. But the intention matters.
Fabulous. Thank you. Thank you. Captain Kathy, how about you?
Hey, so I actually have a couple different points of when I knew it was time to pivot or really accept an opportunity that was being provided to me. As I mentioned before, I didn't particularly recognize that my experience leaving nuke school was a pivot point. But I do have a couple where I did. The first was my acceptance to the United States Naval Academy. I come from a smaller city in North Carolina, and I had no thought of going into the military. I had family who served in World War II and in Vietnam. My family's in public service. My father's a judge, a retired judge now. But the military life was not anything I ever had experienced or even thought about. But I decided to accept my appointment to the United States Naval Academy, and I had no clue what I was getting into. But I felt, really knew, as much as any 17-year-old can, that it was the right place and that right pivot for me. And my life took a dramatic, turn. Second, and a little over a decade after that time at starting USNA, it was recommended to me to apply for what we call early command. So for me, command of a warship at the lieutenant level with about 8 or 9 years of service. Typically, your first command comes at the commander level, which is about the 17-year mark. Early command was something I had never ever thought about or thought that I could do or experience or be a part of that. But my Commodore, my commanding officer's boss, had some faith in me and recommended me, for that. So I put in my package, I did my interviews, and the next thing I knew, I was selected and assigned and then commanding a ship, at like 30. Again, things that you sort of know when you're going through it, that you need to accept this challenge and make that change. And as you work through it, who is there with you and helping and supporting you, and yourself, believing in yourself that you can do these things, but maybe understanding that there's a prod from something else or someone else to get you to that direction.
Awesome. Wow. What a great win and earned win on your part. Alicia, Captain Kathy brings up something, and I wonder, have you used any tools or resources like a mentor or a coach to help you make these breakthroughs?
Yes, I've been going through therapy, do counseling, but one of my mentors is Dr. Shirley Weber. That was always my support. She always encouraged me on, keep going forward. And, and I look at some of, like, I consider even Deborah, even Rosen as one of my mentors, always there to encourage you, always there to keep you going. But, for the most part, deep down inside within you, you have to want to do these things. You have to want to go forward. But my mentors were always there to guide me and really to help me. And, sometimes you didn't even have to ask a question, but it seems like because you were ready to go forward, they would always say the right things to keep you encouraged, to keep you going forward.
Perfect. Thank you. It seems like you had a lot of the answers within yourself and they helped you pull them out. Yeah. Erica.
I'll say that my healing process, especially with depression, started by watching YouTube videos. I remember just asking the question, how can I overcome depression? And then I started reading self-development books. And one thing took me to another thing. I remember that in one of the self-development books by Jack Canfield, I heard about Toastmasters. I decided to join a Toastmasters club. I was the only Latina, the youngest one in the club, and I was very intimidated to be there. But I was very determined to surround myself with positive people and with people that will help me grow. That there in Toastmasters, I found a lot of mentors that helped me, and also other mentors that I had were my school counselors, people that I was never afraid to reach out to people if I admire someone. I was always curious to hear about their stories, and I think that that is something that helped me in my healing process. The fact that I was always interested in hearing more about a successful person, and I realized that every successful person has a story and has a background of struggle, and that made me realize that every goal is possible. That sometimes we see a person being very successful and we never think about everything that they went through, and that was the biggest realization that I had, and that was the best thing that I learned. And for that reason, I am very grateful with Toastmasters and all my mentors.
Erica, you make such a great point, and I have to say that's why I'm so grateful, and I think everyone who's listening today is so grateful to all of you for sharing your stories, because sometimes, like you said, we look at people and we think, oh, they're so successful, and we don't realize just everything you needed to go through to get to where you are and everything you needed to overcome. So everything that you all are sharing today is truly inspirational. Sarah, would you like to share with us as well?
Yeah, in line with the theme about family, say my mom and dad were definitely my heroes and my mentors. I turned to them for professional advice and personal guidance. So they were my first mentors, and I'm eternally thankful to this day that I can just pick up the phone and ask for guidance. However, I do have two mentors at work that I now turn to as well for navigating my career and getting advice, because they see how I'm operating now, and they've given me really hard feedback. And it's actually been great growth points for me. So I strongly encourage everyone to get more than one mentor and have different objectives for them, whether one's a coach or a learner or a champion, because now I feel like my parents championed me, but I still need someone who's gonna like give me that hard advice at work and tell me, don't ask for permission here, or you know what, you need to do this instead. And so I strongly advocate for getting different levels, different genders, and the mixed perspective really helps you make stronger decisions that work for you.
That's great. Thank you. And I like the fact that you're saying you get different inputs from different people and you're able to put all of that together. If you could solve one problem in the world, just one, there's only a few out there, right? But if you could solve one, Alicia, what would it be?
Probably systemic racism, probably. I would really want to try to solve that.
Okay. And Sarah?
Yeah, to take that a little further, kind of on that note, as humans, we tend to make assumptions. We walk into situations with unconscious biases and predetermined assumptions. I think the world would actually be a better place and a safer place if we didn't have those assumptions already made, and we didn't address conversations and approach conversations with those assumptions already intact. So that would actually end up helping, I think, with racism, to Alicia's point, but also to other, whether it's the refugee crisis or other crises around the world.
Absolutely. And Captain Caffeine?
Actually, I'd like to build on that point. I think as we move through there, it takes listening and active listening to the perspectives and experiences of those around you. We all have different experiences. We all learn, and how do we grow, and without listening and truly trying to break through barriers, be it race, be it gender, without stopping, trying to take off your preconceived notions and really listen to what someone else is going through in their experience, because it will be different from yours, and you will grow and learn as a person and as a society by doing that.
Thank you. Thank you. Learning from others, so important. Erica.
To not be repetitive with Alicia, Sarah, and Emily, if I could change something, it would be the way that people think towards other people. I really wish that everyone can be kind to each other, not make assumptions, that there's no racism, that there's no one thinking like, no one putting other people down. If something that I could change is for everyone to be kind to each other.
Thank you all. I hear similar themes to everything that you've said. And really the idea of affecting change is not an easy thing to do, right? You all started with changing yourselves, and now what can we do to help others? We're starting to see a lot of questions come in on the chat. So I'm going to take some of these and put them out to you. So a question from the panel. What or who, was there someone or something that kept you motivated through life's challenges? Sarah?
I'm smiling 'cause it's definitely my mother. Moms are amazing. You just, you can call with the worst news or the best news or stupid news, and they are there always. At least my mother is there to just lift me up. And she has given me very hard talk. She has this expression that says, take the feedback that makes you cry. She has definitely made me cry, but she has also been the one that reminds me that the stars are the limit. And she has been my #1 champion and motivator. And my mother, just so you know, got married at 18 in a pretty arranged marriage, had a baby 9 months later, and came to this country not knowing English. And she became a biologist. She's a cancer researcher. She has 3 kids at home. She's this kick-ass woman, and I hope I could be just half the woman she is, but she motivates me every day.
Well, I see why, absolutely. Alicia?
Oh, I have to say it. I think I have a baby brother who I talk to him every day. He keeps me motivated. But I have to say my family as a whole, we all have every day, we all have a group text. And every day we talk to each other. We keep each other motivated. And so it goes on and on and on and on. So it's really my family that keeps me motivated. No one gets the chance to get down. And so I love this every day. We're on the group text every morning. And I have 8 sisters and brothers. I have my son. I have 6 grandchildren. Although they're not on there, but my children are there, my nieces and my nephew, and everybody's talking, and everybody is keeping everyone motivated. And so it's my family.
Oh, that's awesome. I have to tell you, I have 6 brothers and sisters too, so I know about those group texts. Captain Kathy?
I think I'm fortunate to add on to the family theme here. And as I've, we'll say gone through life, that support system grows, through my younger years, through college and moving forward and through today. But my parents, my mother provided the drive and that belief that through hard work and dedication and pushing yourself forward, you can achieve as long as you apply yourself. From my father, I found a stack of letters. My daddy always sent me letters, postcard, and he always signed them, "Be positive, love, Dad." So that subliminal messaging for years, decades of that "be positive," combined with that drive of my mother. And then I have to add my husband and my children, my stepchildren and our 2 younger ones. My husband has what I see as an unshakable faith and belief in me, that humbles me, you know, to this day. And that, and for all my kids and my family, you know, wanting to make sure that they can see what we can achieve, again, with that positive outlook and drive and dedication, and wanting to make sure that I am setting the example for all of them, and that enrichment they bring to my life, to pay that back by doing the best that I can.
Oh, that's great. Thank you. I love hearing about that love story. Erica?
I'll say that my biggest motivator is my 14-year-old son. He is the person that I always think of when I do something. I always tell myself, how can you tell your son to follow his dreams if you don't follow your dreams? He is my biggest motivator, and he's the reason why I do everything that I do. And also my family, my parents who came to this country with the hope of a better life, who always work in the fields for the minimum wage. I want to show them that their sacrifices were worth it. And they are also my biggest motivators, as well as my community and all the people that follow me and that are always encouraging me to keep going forward. Thank you.
Thank you for that. I have another question in the chat, and you've talked a little bit about the help that you got along the way, but maybe there are some specific instances or individuals you'd like to call out. Sarah?
Yeah, the concept of getting help is always interesting because you don't really know you need it until life slaps you in the face. And suddenly I became, you know, I suddenly started just receiving all these gifts from friends, like these self-help books. And I had never really even touched self-help books till after my divorce, I'll be honest. And suddenly that just became piles on my nightstand. And that's all I would get on if you looked at my Kindle, you'd laugh. And so I turned, you know, I mentioned Eckhart Tolle. That was my turning point, reading The Power of Now and The Good Earth. I definitely recommend Eckhart Tolle. I also did some spiritual readings. I also turned to my faith. My faith also was a big part of just kind of grounding me and having a deep, deep-rooted belief that this is what's happening for you is meant to happen and it's good for you. And oftentimes you just have to have faith and know that it's going to work out. So my faith also played a big role. I do believe in being vulnerable and asking for help. I had friends that I said, you know, I might just call you in the middle of the night if I don't feel well. I kind of developed my own little club of support system. And I had a few friends that were just there for me. If I needed to eat with someone or go for a walk, I would just say, hey, and they knew that they had to be there for me. And I'm eternally grateful to some friends who stood by me. My sister, I mean, I've called her at 1 a.m. in the morning, waking her up. She could barely even talk, and she was there for me. So I do believe that forming that support system is super important. And then lastly, a hobby. I dance salsa. And I always joke that if I didn't have salsa, I wouldn't have bounced back the way I did, because I had something that was my release. I would go 3 nights a week. You sweat, you dance. There's physical touch involved that makes you feel seen. And that's really important. So I do encourage, if anyone's going through anything, to find that thing that brings you joy and gives you an active release. I strongly encourage it.
Absolutely. Thank you. And Alicia?
Oh, if I had one person to say, you know, I have a niece that I raised, and she has been there for me through thick and thin, my son, but my niece, because she thinks she's my mother. And so she's what has always my motivator. She's always been there for me, no matter. I mean, I had surgery a year ago, and I had to have screws in my back because I couldn't literally walk. But she was literally there for me to take care of me, to motivate me, and like she was saying, books. I had books to read, you know, and you know, things that just keep me going. And you know, but deep down in it, I will always go back to, you have to want to do it. You have to dig down deep within, you know, and bring that, because everybody has something in them to bring out that's good and that's positive, you know, to make them to want to move forward. And I think that was a lot of my motivation, because see, I grew up in church, you know, My mom and dad were elders of the church. I was in church. It seemed like I was in church every day, growing up. But, so my faith also really, really helped me a lot to get going as I moved forward.
Great, thank you for sharing that. We still have questions coming in. Captain Kathy, someone has asked, what are you doing right now in your life that you feel is really pivotal to who you are?
Well, that's great. I've shifted through jobs a couple times this year. I've been pushed into specific areas that need a little more focus. I am coming up on my next big sort of career pivot and trying to figure out what it is where my future lies. My husband was also active duty Navy. He retired last year. And so it's not just, it's a different perspective for me of understanding what is next and what is coming forward. So actually having to stop and think about what I want and then how that works with our family. I don't have an answer for that. I can tell you I'm still searching through what that means. I look through my Navy career and what I grow from and recharge from are our sailors on our ships. They are amazing in what they do, in the work, in the daily work that they put on board the ship to make the ship work. It is teamwork, and it has to be. It's not one person, it's the group. And the opportunity to keep going back and doing that and working and supporting them by setting those conditions is what I'm working through, and how to sort of move that forward. So I'm not real sure if that answered the question or not. Probably not.
Yeah, it did.
Where I am trying to figure out what's next and what I love.
Great, thank you. Those are some big decisions ahead.
Thanks.
Erica, how about you?
Yes, before my pictures went viral, I was working a job where I was getting paid well, and I could have stayed there, but somehow I had the opportunity to become a public speaker. And before the current situation, I used to travel all over the country sharing my story with students from middle school all the way to university level. I became a keynote speaker in demand. I was always giving keynote speeches, and also something that I started is my business. I started a jewelry business. As of now, I have 10 people working for me, and the business is growing so fast that I wake up every morning at 6 a.m. and go to sleep at 11. Sometimes I forget that I have to have breakfast. And those are decisions that I had to take, of leaving my comfortable job to start my business. Of becoming a keynote speaker, when in reality I joined Toastmasters because I wanted to confront my fear of public speaking. And it's very ironic that I was so embarrassed of sharing my story, and now I am sharing my story everywhere where I go. It became my purpose. I am helping women that went through domestic abuse. I am the board of director of an organization that helps students. I am the vice president of Toastmasters. I am doing a lot of things at the same time. I'm writing my book. I am planning to start my own nonprofit. And those are only a couple of things that I decided to jump and do, even if I was afraid, because at the end of the day, even if it doesn't work, at least I'm going to learn something. That is what I used to tell myself. And those are the things that I'm currently doing right now.
Well, that's a lot. And, I really appreciate you talking about, joining Toastmasters to overcome your fear of speaking, and here you are today. The definition of fear or courage isn't, just naturally being brave, but being afraid or having fear and overcoming and doing it anyway. So definitely your courage is on full display. You all talked about examples when you were the first and only. And I wonder if you could give us some examples of how you've overcome the challenges that comes with that. When we asked, what is the problem that you'd like to solve? You said racism and unconscious bias. And those are things that you face as the first or the one and only, whether it's the first woman to command a ship at a certain level, or being the only type of minority in school. So if you would share, how you manage through those challenges, I think this is a particular time in current events where this is extremely relevant as well. Captain Kathy?
So I think, as you move through a career, through experiences, you learn whatever you call them your coping mechanisms to get through those. And sometimes they just become ingrained and just say, okay, well, this has occurred. I'll go execute this part of the plan to to respond to that person. Sometimes it's just putting on the blinders and trying to weed that out and just move forward. Sometimes it's when I was on the steam plant, a lot of the chatter was very, we'll call it locker room chat, locker room conversation. And so I built in a couple of phrases that I had that kept me moving forward, but could extricate me from that situation that to me was uncomfortable. And being young, 24 years old, and not personally strong enough yet to stand up and tell them what they were saying is wrong. That is something I have learned and can do now. But then just trying to find the line to get what I needed, run my division, and sort of push through. You can tell them, hey, y'all are, I'm so glad I'm not male, right? That was one of my lines. And so it's building up some of those own support mechanisms. And then at least in the Navy, my experience, and there are always exceptions, but my experience is once at first you show up, you're the first, you're the only female, and they don't really know what to do or say. They're afraid they're going to say something that's going to be too far uncomfortable. But once you show that you're there to work and you're there to do the same job and support them, then you have an opportunity to start moving through some of that I'll call it unsureness, that you're there and you're capable, because that'll be the initial assessment. What does she know, right? And then you get buy-in and you get support. And I have been blessed, really throughout my career and all my different tours to work with phenomenal sailors who really ultimately did not care that I was a girl, or female. We were all there to do our job, whether it was the division, the department, or the ship.
So thank you for that. And Sarah, you talked about being one of the only when you were in school, and you were also an expatriate in another country. Can you tell us how you overcame and got through those challenging situations?
Yeah. So I did not want to move to Riyadh in Saudi Arabia, but I packed our things, we moved, and I'm an extrovert, and I'm a busy bee and a social butterfly. And so I had to find a way to navigate, how am I going to make this work, especially here? I didn't know anyone, and I only had my husband's extended family there at the time. So I jumped on social media and Twitter. I'll be honest, you have to be resourceful and you have to adapt. And I started contacting all the embassies, joining any club possible. Baking club, book club, American Business Council. And through my networking, through social events that I found on Twitter, there's a whole secret underground social society in Saudi Arabia that you will find in secret language through Twitter. And I would somehow show up at a fashion show and meet all these friends. And somehow you have to have faith and you have to be proactive to navigate certain systems. And that's how I ended up building a social network, landing the job I did, and navigating a system that I did not think I could navigate. I'll be honest, moving there, I remember we landed October 30th, 2013. And I was like, how am I going to make this work? But you have to roll up your sleeves with whatever life gives you and find ways. And I was super creative and started hosting people and becoming friends with people that I truly had never really thought I would become friends with, just because my life had not taken me down that path until that point. And I did want to say, Lee, to your question, I think the believing in yourself part is so important. When I graduated college, I wanted to move to Lebanon and go work in refugee camps, and my parents were not having it. And I had to believe in it so I could talk about it, so I could sound convincing to everyone around me. This was what I wanted to do, and this was the right thing for me to do. I didn't do a conventional thing. But if you don't believe in yourself and what your goals are, it's going to be really hard for you to actually carve that path out for yourself.
Absolutely, absolutely. Alicia, you, I'm sure, have been the first and only at times. You talked specifically about some of the examples that you had, either running the companies, the nonprofit. Can you share a little bit how you've overcome challenges that have been presented to you?
Sure. I think about when I first started Guin Sports, and I had an embroidery and silk screening business, which was really a male dominant business. And they didn't like women to be in there at all. They didn't want you a part of that little group right there. And I just kept going. I kept going. And I remember the first time there was a guy from the Padres, Andy Strasburg. He came over, he saw, and he said, I have to admit to you, I just said, oh, she's just a wife that has nothing to do with her time. You know, she didn't know what to do. She's Tony Gwynn's wife, you know. And he said, I have to admit, I did not think that you had what you had. And see, he didn't want to come over, but I kept calling this man every day. And I said, well, I would like to see you to come see, because, you know, I think I could do some of the work that the Padres need done. And so and he finally came over and he said, I would have never thought you had this. He said, I thought you were just a bored wife, just, you know, just wanted something to do, and you have all this. And, you know, I just kept going no matter what. I traveled, I would go different places, and I would go to all these meetings, and there were nothing but men. It was just a male dominant industry, and they weren't nice to me, but I kept going. And, you know, I would say, you know, I could do exactly what you do and probably a little bit better, you know. And so I started creating these designs and stuff, and I started sending them out, you know. And so then I started, you know, I went and got my Major League Baseball licensing, and I started doing a lot of stuff for players, different players. They would have me do their golf tournaments. And I just really started, you know, really commanding the respect. And then I began to get that respect in that industry, you know. And so it's all about, you know, having that confidence in yourself, knowing that you know, and standing on what you believe in and getting it done and making an impact in that particular industry.
Thank you. I'm hearing from a few of the panelists about that self-confidence and belief in yourself. There's been a lot of requests from participants for books that have been impactful to you, authors who you enjoy reading and learning from. I'm going to start with Erica. If you'd share some of your favorite books with us.
Yes, of course. I will share my favorite book, and I'll say this is the first book that I read when I decided to change my life, when I decided to stop being a victim, and it's called God Never Blinks, and the author is Regina Brett, I think, and I read this book 7 or 8 years ago, and I still read the book. Sometimes I grab it, but something very important that I learned from that book is that sometimes even if you're afraid, you still have to, even if you're afraid of doing something, you still have to do it. And this is something very powerful that I read, is a quote that says, less than 2% of teenage mothers get a college degree. And I remember that thanks to that book, I told myself, instead of focusing in the negative side, I focus in being the part of that 2%. And that's, instead of saying I have to go to school, I started saying I get to go to school. And having a different attitude, having a different way of thinking came from that book. And that is my favorite one. And the next one is the book, it's called The 7 Keys of Success from Jack Canfield. It's a big book. And in that book, that became like my Bible for success, because that in that book I learned so many things that I started applying in my life, and that I can say that truly changed my life. And I have a lot of books I will never finish, but those are my 2 favorite ones.
Oh, those are great. Thank you so much for sharing. And I love also and appreciate how you talked about, words have meaning about, and they affect our feelings, right? So there's an expression I really enjoy, and it's our thoughts become our words and our words become our actions, right? Captain Kathy, how about you? Some books or authors you'd like to share?
I read a lot. I've always read a lot, and I read anything from historical fiction to fiction to, and I read more fiction than I do nonfiction. I will completely admit that, because frankly, I do a lot of technical reading during the day. But what I enjoy about reading are the different experiences in fiction, historical fiction, and some of these books. They just give you perspective, right? They help you understand what somebody else is going through, is experiencing. Some of the nonfiction books recently are like Educated and Becoming, and they're touching, and they help you grow. And I know I need some list of some specifics and a little more. I go through books like candy, but because it opens up my mind to something other than what I have learned or I have experienced. And so you can go to top seller lists, you can go to, classic fiction and historic fiction and get that perspective of what somebody else has done. I mean, I've read everything from Bruce Springsteen's biography or autobiography, to I mentioned a couple of the other, autobiographies as well. And so I just read and actively read and what you're doing. And so I need to come up with probably a list, but just read.
Well, I think you've given us some good examples. And when you talk about, biographies and historical books, really it does help to understand our past in order to build a better future. Alicia, do you have some books or authors you'd like to share?
I'm a very spiritual person, so I read a lot of, one of the books that I have read is The Road Less Traveled. I like that book, and I forget who the author is, but I read a lot of spiritual books, and so a lot of books by Renee Brown, Kenneth Copley. So, one of the books that, and I think you have to understand spirituality from the books like, Shattered Strongholds, He Came to Set the Captive Free. Those are the books that I read because I'm a real spiritual person. And so, but it really helps me really know within myself, and to really helps my discernment grow.
I can appreciate that. Thank you so much. Sarah, would you like to share any books also?
Yeah, so, I mentioned Eckhart Tolle, both The Power of Now and A Good Earth. Those are very transformational if you're open to the messaging within his words. I also, The Power of Vulnerability and Daring Greatly by Brene Brown. I've had the luxury of hearing her speak a couple times, but I've watched her videos online. I've read all her books. Definitely has helped with self-confidence at work, at home. It's been, her books are transformational. And then lastly, my recommendation is Radical Candor by Kim Scott. And that also is just really great for just knowing how to just be honest, not only with yourself, but with those around you. So those are my top 3.
Absolutely, some great books. And I have to say that with the onset of COVID, I've become quite addicted to Audible, which is a great way to get some books in as well, listening to books while you're walking. So great recommendations. How about a last, maybe a couple of questions from our audience. And one is, what about how have you been able to give back based on the lessons that you've learned and the experiences that you've had? And Erica, would you like to share?
Yes, of course. It's very ironic that, like I said, I used to be embarrassed of my story, but I always knew that I wanted to help women that went through domestic abuse, that I wanted to help underrepresented students. And now I am able to give back with my business by donating for scholarships. I also I am able to give up by sharing my story with other students, by volunteering to go to classrooms where teachers teach students about my story, and then there I appear. I volunteer my time by mentoring other students. I also, like I said, I am a board director. I am the board director of a nonprofit organization that focuses on helping students. Another thing, being the vice president of Toastmasters, mentoring all the members and planning to start the first bilingual Toastmasters in North County are only a couple of things that I'm doing to pay it forward. And something big that I want to do for a person is to be able to one day pay the full scholarship of a student so that they can go to college.
Awesome, thank you. And Alicia?
So we have the Tony and Alicia Guin Foundation. And so my son, one of my husband's dreams was my son and my husband was going to start Guin Baseball. So we give scholarships to the underserved. Most of our kids that play baseball is the underserved. I also have a group of women that I have, we have Zoom, and it's empowerment. So to encourage the women, to keep them going, and also we have scholarships for the children, the kids are going off to college. So there's so much that we do. The goal for my son is to build a Guin complex, where all the other kids can play. And these underserved, all his teams, every one of them are underserved. We give them scholarships so they'll have the opportunity to play baseball. And that was one of my husband's dreams. And so we continue to do that. And we give a lot of educational scholarships.
Fabulous, thank you for all that you do for the community. And Captain Kathy?
I think within the Navy community, one thing I've learned is really how to be a mentor. And that is not something I knew how to do or be until my mentor, and watching him and watching what he had done for me, and seeing how he reached out to other of my peers and folks as well. And by taking his example, and then I'm like, oh, that's how you do it. And I think that is I like to think that I pay what he has done for me forward, to others. But reaching out, and it doesn't matter, rank or where you are. People need help within the organization. They may have a personal problem. They may just need career advice, and they may just need a sounding board. And being able to be there and help, and then actively learn how to reach out and check on folks. And hopefully then that they learn, that from me too, so that my role models, experience and his impact on me hopefully helps transcends and moves that forward as well.
Great, thank you. And Leslie, Sarah, can you tell us how you are paying it forward or have been able to give back?
Yeah, I have a really weird relationship with time, because I feel like any time I need to be doing something productive. I currently sit on the American Arab Discrimination Committee chapter here in San Diego. I'm on board. Through that, I've been tutoring a refugee family here English for 2 years. So developing that relationship, taking them to the hospital, taking them shopping, helping them assimilate to their new life here. So that is a big part of what I've been doing the last couple of years. Really helping around April is Arab American Awareness Month, and so helping with raising awareness about the culture through film festival, through cultural events. And then for 12 years, I was on the board of the Network of Arab American Professionals. And that allowed me to do a lot of interfaith work, intercultural work around building bridges. So I've got to work with so many different communities that way. And it's been so rewarding, which I think has led me to my role now doing inclusion work and diversity work at Qualcomm. My job now allows me to just do a lot of outreach to different communities and give access to kids and adults to STEM and to careers.
Great, all powerful stories of where you overcame, what you're doing, and how you're giving back. Thank you so much for spending this time with us and sharing your journeys so that we can apply some of those lessons ourselves. At this point, I am going to turn it back over to Deborah Rosen. And Deborah, thanks so much for giving me a chance to be part of this panel and hear from these amazing women today.
Yeah, what a great group, right, Lee? And of course, no, there's not a better moderator because you've pivoted so much. You really understood what they're going through and did a great job. Thank you so much, Emily, Sarah, Erica, and Alicia. And I have to tell you, I've known Alicia for 25 years. And Alicia might be mad I'm telling you this story, but you know, over the years, Alicia always told me what she faced. We talked a little bit about the whole discrimination and just the biases. And over the years, we've had some long conversations, and she always shared with me stories. And I said, I just don't get it. I just don't understand it. And it wasn't that I didn't believe it, and it wasn't that I didn't hear it. I heard what she was saying, but I didn't really get it until probably a couple weeks ago, watching everything happen now. And I called her and I said, Alicia, I said, I finally understand what you're talking about. I just didn't get it. And I just was always afraid to ask questions. And so the one thing I've really learned about this is you can't be afraid to ask questions. Ask questions if you don't understand. And I want to tell you, I've learned a lot from you, Alicia, and now you're going to get a ton of questions. I mean, for so many years, I was afraid to ask, and I kind of heard it, but I didn't understand it. But now I do, and I got to tell you, you've been a great friend over the years, and I've learned so much from Emily and Sarah and Erica, and I hope that we continue to grow together. And thank you so much for joining us. And I look forward to seeing all of you at San Diego Women's Week on August 28th. Thank you. So with that, we'll say goodbye. And if anybody has any questions, I'm always available. You've got my cell phone, you've got my email. It's all on the Chamber's website. Thank you so much, everybody. Have a great day and stay inspired.
Deborah.
Thanks. Bye.
Deborah. Bye. Thanks.
All right.